What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown. This is the Heresy Financial Show, and today I have a thought experiment for you. Lately, it is becoming increasingly obvious that this nation is filled with many different cultures and groups of people who live absolutely at odds with each other. So the question is, what is the answer moving forward? With the American empire overextended and trying to shove down the throats of people ideologies that are absolutely incompatible with everything they believe in, what is the reason why this nation has to stay unified? And if there is no good reason for why the nation has to stay unified, does that mean that either a national breakup or divorce is the answer, or is secession the answer? And in this video, we are going to talk about those two because even though they are taboo topics, it seems increasingly so today that secession is the answer that would fix America. Ready? Let's dive in. I have one big request for you while you watch the rest of this video, and that is that you keep an open mind about this because I'm going to use some examples for different extremes of ideologies that make up specific groups in America. And I don't want that to alienate you from the conversation here because I'm saying, hey, there's people that think this way, and then there's people that think this way. I am not making a value judgment on whether either of those or each of those or neither of those are correct or truthful or good or bad. I'm just saying, hey, these people exist. Therefore, how is the best way to move forward here? So that's my ask. Just keep an open mind, knowing that I'm not placing value on either of those. So let's start off by looking at first the historical and legal argument for secession. Constitutionally speaking, every single state cannot have any rights that do not belong to other states. So another way of saying that is if Arizona and California have the right for X, Y, or Z, that means every other state by definition must have those rights as well, even if they are not expressly articulated in those states' constitutions. When you go back to the founding of the United States of America, there were a few states that explicitly stated that they had the right to secession, which means that constitutionally speaking, at the beginning of this nation, every single state included in the Union also had the right to secede. So you might ask, why would a state have the right to secede and what good would that do? Well, let's put this a different way. That especially this is something that, many people, I think on the left would identify with. Let's say I'm an employer and you are my employee and you have no choice to leave to go to another company. There are other companies out there. You might want to be an entrepreneur and start your own company, but you have no choice. And when I say no choice, I mean that if you try to leave, to stop showing up to work, to start your own business, I can put you in jail. I can use violence legally to stop you from doing those things. So that is what I mean by no choice. Well, pretty easily, I would then be able to abuse that relationship, right? Because there's no reality in which you can escape me. Therefore, I have no skin in the game to make sure you have a good experience as my employee. I can make you do whatever I want with no fear of repercussions. I do not have to fear you leaving and me losing you as an employee. Well, the states thought the exact same thing. They said, hey, if we create a government over ourselves as a federal government over the states, and that federal government becomes abusive, becomes totalitarian, has too much control, well then we want to be able to just leave. Because if we can't leave, then it gives that federal government any ability to increase its power whatsoever and abuse the states' rights and take over the position that the states should have, and the states can't do anything about it. So we want to make sure that if it ever gets to the point where states are getting taken advantage of by the federal government, we can just leave. And just the choice to leave alone, not even the act of leaving, but just the fact that that choice exists puts protection in place against the federal government from becoming too overbearing. overbearing, from becoming too powerful, because it knows if at any point it does, then somebody will leave. So it puts a check on that power. Now, we all know what happened a little bit later, 100 years later, during the Civil War. A bunch of states tried to secede. This is where I'm going to ask you to keep an open mind here, because this discussion is not about slavery. This discussion is not about racism. This discussion is about secession. And the Civil War, if you look at what Lincoln actually said, there's a good book by Thomas J. DiLorenzo called The Real Lincoln. He's got a couple books about Lincoln. Basically, it's very, very easy when you look at the documents, the historical documents about what Lincoln said. The Civil War was not fought over slavery. It was fought about preserving the Union. The most famous example of these lines, although there are dozens and dozens of these, Lincoln said, if I could save the Union and free all the slaves, I would. If I could save the Union and free some slaves, I would. If I could save the Union and free none of the slaves, I would. It wasn't about freeing the slaves. It was about preserving the Union. Why? Because the South was agricultural, so they imported a lot of stuff. And at that time, there was no federal income tax, and the federal government made all of their money from tariffs. And the South imported everything pretty much except for the stuff that they created because they were agricultural. And so they imported a lot of stuff. So they produced a lot of income for the federal government. And then if they seceded, that meant that the federal government would lose out on all that income because the North created a lot of their own stuff and they didn't have as many imports, and therefore there wasn't as much tariff income. That was the main reason why this Civil War was started. And so Abraham Lincoln, the only president who decided to use the military to invade its own citizens and stop a constitutionally protected secession from happening. Now, again, please keep in mind, nothing to do with racism or slavery. I firmly believe that the consequences of the evils of slavery were borne out in the Civil War, and the slaughter of all of the American citizens, both on the North and the South, were the consequences for decades and, 100 years plus of the evils that were performed from slavery. So this has nothing to do with that. This has to do with the legal and constitutional right to secession and why that existed. But from that point forward, the right to secession was obviously gone, and that discussion hasn't come back up until pretty recently. And now we are sitting at a place in America where we are more divided than we have been since the Civil War. So now the question comes up, why are we trying to prevent secession from happening today? Why do we think that it is necessary for people who disagree with each other about almost everything in life, how to live, the rights to have, from being a part of the same nation and forcing them to have the same set of laws? You look at one group of people and let's say the stereotype of somebody on the far left. You're looking at the nation and saying the nation is taking away my rights, let's say the rights of women to choose. You say the nation is protecting the rights of evil people to kill people whenever they want by making sure that they have access to dangerous weapons. You're on the left, you're saying there are people who are empowering evil corporations to take advantage of us, keep poor people poor, protect the rich people. Why in the world would you want to still be part of a nation that does all that? Wouldn't it benefit you if you were able to be a part of a different nation that had laws and regulations and a culture that corresponded with all of your ideals, corresponded with everything that you value? Wouldn't it be better if there was a different group that was the opposite of you to let them leave, because then your nation would be more closely aligned with what you wanted? Now let's say on the other side, you're on the far right, you're looking at the country and you're saying, hey, the country is stepping on our rights. The country is full of politically powerful people that are keeping poor people poor, protecting rich oligarchs, protecting the rights of people who want to mutilate children and kill babies and take away our rights to protect ourselves. Those are what things that the people on the right are saying. If that's you, why do you want to be a part of a nation that is doing that? Wouldn't it be better if you could be a part of your own nation of people with like-minded beliefs and ideals? Wouldn't it be better if you allowed somebody on the other side to leave and form their own nation so that they can not be influencing you? So it really boggles my mind here why anybody on either extreme or even anybody in the middle would be opposed to secession here. It's a win-win for everybody. Now, I ran a question on Twitter recently. I said, what is a good reason to oppose secession? And the main answer that people said was avoiding war. But when you ask the question, what's the main reason to avoid or to stop a peaceful secession, then the war isn't the answer there, because by nature of asking the question, hey, should we allow secession? Then that wouldn't be something that would prompt war because you're allowing it. So then the second main argument is, hey, it'd be really complex to deal with things from business transactions and taxes, international trade. Look at what happened with Brexit. And my answer is, that's that's kind of the point. I mean, whether you're on the left or you're on the right, you're looking at things right now and you're saying politically, people are too powerful on the right. And then on the left, you're saying corporations are too powerful. Secession would fix that, right? Because smaller government, local governments get more power. There's not as much top down. The power is more skin in the game, more closely held to the people who are making the rules. So that solves the political power on one hand. Then on the other hand, you've got the corporate power is greatly reduced. I don't think it's any secret to anybody, but the United States being one country instead of 50 countries makes it much easier for businesses to scale and grow across states, right? Because you're dealing with basically one set of laws instead of having to go into each different state as a different country and deal with those laws and establish businesses. That means it gets harder for corporations to grow. You don't want them big. You want local businesses. You want entrepreneurship. You want small businesses. You want individual ownership in local businesses that create wealth. You don't want these massive corporations that swell and scale to the point of being bureaucratic and massive billions, trillions of dollars businesses that can enforce their political will over hundreds of millions of people by lining the correct pockets. So you want those divisions there to make it harder to grow. That makes it easier for the local people to succeed. It spreads the wealth out in a good way, in a non-artificial way, in a way that promotes bottom up, which is natural from a decentralized freedom individual standpoint. And so from many points of view, again, whether you're on the left or on the right, you can look at this and say, you know what? Secession would actually be a good thing here. If you're looking at the nation, you're saying, hey, California wants to secede. The loser is the Democratic Party in the rest of the nation, right? Because they lose most of their voters to California becoming a nation. So it's not the people in the rest of America that lose. It's not the people in California that lose. It's just the Democratic Party that loses. Let's take a state like Texas, and let's say they want to secede. Who's the loser there? The Republican Party. They lose a lot of their voters. It's not the people in the rest of America. It's not the people in Texas, because then everybody, on average, gets more of what they want if that was to happen. The last question about this is looking at things like debt, looking at things like military, and obviously that would be complicated. But when you consider the alternative, that we have a nation that has scaled to the point of being so big it will break. When you have an empire that gets as overextended as we are. We have military bases in or near every country on earth, hundreds of them. We have a national debt that will never get repaid. We are on the brink of a deflationary death spiral or a hyperinflationary collapse, one or the other. It is not possible to survive on the path that we're on. And really the only answer is, are we going to go down with the entire ship collapsing? Or are we going to allow some lifeboats to escape and allow some individual freedom here and try and go about the dissolution in a smart way that allows most opportunity for most people to not get taken down with the ship? And in my opinion, that's the answer. And that's why I think secession is a solution that could provide most of the answers we need for how to move forward as a failing empire. Let me know your thoughts in the description below. And if you found this video thought-provoking, send it along to somebody you think will enjoy it as well. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.